Hey guys, how's it going? It's Dankoni here and welcome back to the Overwatch League Roundup 2019 off-season. And while I was in the hospital, I watched the Overwatch Shanghai Masters Invitational, which, if you didn't know what was going on, it was the four Chinese Overwatch League teams, so the Shanghai Dragons, Chengdu Hunters, Guangzhou Charge and the Hangzhou Spark, taking part in a off-season competition in China. And it was actually really interesting to watch because it gives us a little insight into the new players for the likes of Shanghai and Guangzhou, and it also gives us an idea of perhaps where these teams are at right now, although it can be hard to tell sometimes because we don't know how much scrim time all of these teams have had. They may have had less compared to others. Anyway, the actual setup of the whole thing, the graphics and the stage were really nicely done. Really nicely done. I suggest you check it out if you didn't see it. One word of warning, it is on Hangzhou Spark's channel, and it is all the commentary and that is in Chinese. So that's unfortunate, but it's still a really good watch, and there was some really good Overwatch on show as well. So this was really a really good tournament to give us an idea where these guys are at. But it started off with the Shanghai Dragons taking on the Hangzhou Spark. And I said the other day that Hangzhou Spark obviously haven't made much in terms of signings. They've let a few players go. They've not really stepped forward from where they were last season. They've kind of stuck with what they've got. That's not always a bad thing, but a lot of the teams around them are making moves, and so I'm worried that the Hangzhou Spark will get left behind. Shanghai Dragons, however, as we know, have made a lot of moves in this window, and it really does show. So, the Shanghai Dragons in the semi-final beat the Hangzhou Spark 3-0, and to be quite honest, this wasn't very close. This wasn't very close at all. Shanghai outclassed Hangzhou. Now, this might be for a variety of reasons. Shanghai, in my opinion, now have got better players than Hangzhou have got, but it also could be that Hangzhou have not had as much scrim time as Shanghai have in the preseason yet. We are still pretty early in the preseason, let's remember. There's some teams that still haven't got their full rosters together yet, so we're still very early in the process of teams getting ready for the 2020 Overwatch League season, but this is a very early indication of where we're at. And if this is just an early indication of what Shanghai Dragons can do, this team is scary. And I mean really scary. So it's well worth a watch because the Dragons in this tournament, yeah, it's the Shanghai Invitational, the Shanghai Masters, but damn, this team looks good. It looks really good, and it looks just as good as I feared it did look. So anyway, the Spark put up a good fight, but what was interesting for me was a look at the Shanghai Dragons in terms of their DPS lineup and their tank lineup. And the obviously new incoming support Li Gon. Li Gon looked really good. We know he's good from Runaway. And he was getting picks, which was really good on the Lucio. And what was interesting is that I had a question mark over Stand 1 as their main tank. That has been cleared for me right now. Stand 1 looked really good throughout this competition. But what was the most interesting thing is the most played DPS duo that Shanghai put out. It was Lip and Ding. And this looks like it works. This looks like a really good DPS duo for the Shanghai Dragons. And Lip looks like a really good player. A really good player. And honestly, he looked like the best DPS in the tournament. So yeah, the Shanghai Dragons have got a player on their hands here, and I was expecting Fleta to feature a lot for the Shanghai Dragons. But to be quite honest, when Fleta came in, which most of the time he came in for Ding, I think the Shanghai Dragons looked ever so much weaker without Ding in the lineup when they had Fleta in. So yeah, that's kind of where I stand on that. The best DPS duo at the moment for Shanghai Dragons, it looks like, is Lip and Ding. And boy oh boy, is it a DPS duo. But enough about the Hangzhou Spark and the Shanghai Dragons. We have other teams in this tournament. So the next one was the Chengdu Hunters taking on the Guangzhou Charge. And again, Guangzhou Charge was a team that I highlighted the other day as having a lot of question marks over them with the signings they've had on them. And the Chengdu Hunters, again, a team that hasn't changed much. But we are talking about the majority of the Chinese Overwatch World Cup team. So there's not much wrong with that team, is there? And again, another thing that shows. Guangzhou Charge ran Neptuno for pretty much the entire match, which I was very, very interested in and kind of surprised about. But he looked decent enough. Nero looked as good as ever for the Guangzhou Charge. Krong looked okay on the off-tank. But one thing is for certain, Chengdu, their cooperation, the synergy, the teamwork, it's on another level. Jinmu's Farah, I mean, oh my goodness me. Jinmu and Leave are fantastic. But the problem with the Chengdu Hunters I find sometimes, and we saw it a bit during this tournament, is sometimes I think they can rely on leaving Jinmu a bit too much. We get a Meng with some plays sometimes. And Elsa, we didn't see Late Young or Jiuquan. But mainly, if the Chengdu Hunters are winning, it's normally Jinmu or Leave that are popping off. And when they don't pop off, Chengdu Hunters very often come up short. Now, Chengdu Hunters, Leave and Jinmu and that, they were able to pop off against the Guangzhou Charge. Happy had good moments, Eileen had good moments, Nero had good moments, but again, it's what I feared. The Guangzhou Charge tanks and support lineup, I don't think matched up to what Chengdu have got. And so, the Guangzhou Charge did lose 3-0 to the Chengdu Hunters. And I think that's probably what I would have predicted. Before I knew this tournament was going to happen. And before it happened, I kind of thought, yeah, Shanghai Chengdu final. I could kind of see that. Because I don't think Hangzhou and Guangzhou have got the meat to match the likes of Chengdu and Shanghai right now. And it made for an interesting final between Shanghai and Chengdu. And this was the maps here were closer than Shanghai kind of stomped Hangzhou. Chengdu and Guangzhou was a bit closer, but the Shanghai-Chengdu match, it was a 4-0 to Shanghai, right? So Shanghai won the Shanghai Masters. Whatever. But the results are kind of, we kind of put them to one side, and we look about how individual players played, and how the maps kind of worked out. And we saw a lot of different stuff in the Shanghai-Chengdu match. And I think it's the most interesting match to watch if you're going to watch any of them. So, when Shanghai forced Chengdu onto the meta comps, like the Sigma Orisa, because they were playing live patch, and the Mei Reaper and stuff like that, Shanghai looked by far the better team. Lip on Reaper is just crazy. And they really went past Chengdu fairly easily on those comps. But obviously this is the Chengdu Hunters we're talking about. And if there's one thing that's the trademark of the Chengdu Hunters, it's playing off meta. And I think one thing especially to highlight, if you go back and watch the map 4, which was Route 66, they both played dive. Both teams played dive. And this is where Chengdu, even though they did lose the map, Chengdu look blooming good on dive. They looked better than Shanghai did. And one question I did have over Shanghai is Shanghai put stand 1, when they had to match the dive from Chengdu, they put stand 1 on the Winston, right? I wasn't convinced about stand 1's Winston. Now, I'm aware that it's probably not going to come up much in the Overwatch League season right now unless there is a big meta shift, and dive doesn't look like the meta right now, so it's not too much to worry about. But we saw some interesting stuff from Shanghai. We also saw Geguri on the first map, but in the main tank role on Orisa. And yes, she's not as good as stand 1 in my opinion, but she's still very competent. They won the map, obviously. So I think they've got their replacement main tank if they were to need it. So I don't see the Shanghai Dragons moving anyone out to sign Bumper. So I think that's that kind of solved now. I think this is the Shanghai Dragons roster we're going to see next year. Chengdu Hunters, yeah, when they get to play their off-meta stuff, and they're not, I'm not saying they're not countered, but they get away with stuff, then they are really powerful. And if we were to go back to Dive, I think Chengdu would be a very scary team. But Shanghai were very good at making on-the-fly in-game changes to counter what Chengdu were running. So we saw Lip on the Sombra, and Lip Sombra looks good as well. We saw Shanghai change a lot of things up to make sure that Chengdu didn't get that compositional advantage. The only time the Chengdu Hunters got the compositional advantage in the games was when they both went Dive. And I think we can all accept that. But when it went downhill for the Chengdu Hunters is when Chengdu Hunters the Shanghai Dragons went on their attack for Route 66, which was the last map of the tournament in the end. They went back to Orisa, but they went Orisa Roadhog, and this is where Chengdu started to get outmatched when they couldn't play the Dive. Because you can't play Dive into that. Not what Shanghai were running. So that's where it gets difficult. But the Route 66 match was much, much, much closer than what we'd seen before. But Lip looked good on all of the DPS. DM did come in for the Shanghai Dragons, and he looked really good on a Tracer. Chengdu Hunter's DPS line always looks good and looks just as good as it was. I was impressed with Guangzhou Charge's DPS line as well. I mean, they've got a really good DPS line, but I don't think the rest of the team is keeping up quite with them. Hangzhou Spark, yeah, the DPS look good for the Hangzhou Spark, but I'm not sure whether this team can keep up, really. Guzhui was well and truly matched by Stand 1 against Shanghai. And yeah, I still have a lot of question marks over Hangzhou Spark. Perhaps more than anyone else, because I think when you look at these four teams, you'd expect Guangzhou Charge to probably be the weakest out of them. But Hangzhou Spark, yeah, there's some questions I still kind of want answered from the Hangzhou Spark. And they're still only running an 8-man roster right now, so there's still time for them to sort things out. But one thing to take away from this mainly is Shanghai Dragons. And they look very, very, very good. And this is only the very early stages of scrims and early pre-season. So Shanghai Dragons look like they've got really good synergy. They've mastered a lot of comps. And they've got really good in-game adaptation. And at the moment, although it's very early days, they look like they could be one of the better teams in the league right now. And that's something. Shanghai Dragons have really, really improved. But I'm going to leave it here for this one. Sorry if I still sound a bit groggy. This is recorded on a day I did get discharged from the hospital, so I'm still very papega and very tired. But I'm going to go and sleep now. So, thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, give it a like, subscribe if you're new, and I'll see you in the next video. See you then.